Thank you. Thank you all for being here to celebrate Hongwei's amazing book. And thank you, Hongwei, for being here with us today to talk about your book. I will read Hongwei's bio. Hongwei Bao is a poet, scholar, and writer. They grew up in Inner Mongolia, China. Their work explores the issue of identity, especially queer and East Asian identity. And their Instagram is included, which will be in the chat. So, welcome. It's such a pleasure to be talking to you today.
Thank you, PJ, for the very kind introduction. It's my great pleasure to be here today, too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Will you start us off with a reading, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll probably be reading my title poem, which is called The Passion of the Rabbit God. So in a way, this sets a background for our discussion. So the first poem is of the book is actually called Confession of the Rabbit God. It is a dramatic monologue or persona poem that tells the story of the rabbit god. And of course, I mean, before the book starts, I mean, I need to introduce what the story is about. So the rabbit god story is a kind of classical Chinese text from 16th century. And in the classical text, 子不语, so there was only a paragraph of the story. And of course, I mean, nobody knows who the rabbit god is, and the rabbit god didn't have any speech. So in this, persona poem, I'm trying to give the rabbit god the right to speech and use his voice to tell his own story. Confession of the rabbit god. My honorable sir, please forgive me for following you like a shadow. Excuse my boldness to desire your body. I've upset you. My offense has no excuse. I'm here to give my own defense. There's a sensation in this world called sir. It's possessed by women as well as by men. There's a feeling amongst all beings named Yu. Even Confucius, the sage, couldn't deny it, nor could he expect anyone to repress it. Emperor Ai of Han Dynasty cut the long sleeve of his robe so his beloved Dongxian could have a more late morning sleep in. Lord Ling Away shared a peach with his favorite Mi Zixia. Their happy smiles outshone the brightest flowers in the orchard. My feeling for you is no different. Our southern province of Fujian is well known for Nanfeng. Whether this refers to Nanfeng or Nanfeng is for the wise to decide. Men live with men, swearing fraternity and lifelong commitment. Women live with women, brushing hair for each other till death. Generation after generation, they prosper and perish. I fell for you, my dearest sir, the first time I saw you. I look up to your stature as grand as a Mount Tai. I admire your composure as calm as a pine tree. I marvel at your knowledge and wisdom as deep as East Sea. I desire your beauty as delicate as cherry blossoms. I dream of you each night and taking delight in seeing you every morning. How I long to stay close, smelling your scent, touching your skin. My heart desire cannot be fulfilled. A tormented soul only I know I have. I'm humble, but my love is not. If Emperor Wei and Lord Ling were here today, they'd given me their blessings. My kindest sir, I readily leave myself at your mercy, anticipating the harshest punishment. But I beg your forgiveness, my most generous sir. My love for you is all for all to see. Heaven and earth bear my witness. So this was a kind of court trial when the rabbi god Hu Tianbao made his own confession, and after that he was executed. So that was a segment of reimagining of the speech or court trial.
Thank you. That was amazing reading and such a beautiful poem and such a beautiful rendering of, a story that existed that is yours and belongs to everyone. And, it's a really beautiful poem. Thank you for reading it. As someone, speaking of myself, who doesn't think in English, there's so many concepts that I find that there's no language for in English. When I think of something and I want to write it, there's no cultural context, there's no literal way to parse it to, completely enlighten an English audience as to what I'm trying to say. How did you find it to render the concept of the rabbit god? And do you think that you lost anything in translation? And do you think that you gained anything? How was it for you?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for your question, PJ. And my short answer is it's very difficult, and I'm still experimenting with it. So, as you can see, for this poem, I have some Chinese characters as well as pinyin. I try to translate those Chinese characters in brackets. So, for example, if I have qing or yu in Chinese characters, I put its translation in brackets. When I read it out, I simply don't read out the ones in the bracket. So that's one way that I do the translation. And another important element is the prefaces or the epilogue of the poem. So I gave some context of the story at the beginning of the poem, sometimes at the end of the poem. So this is a lot of cultural translation work. Of course, I'm aware that for a classical Chinese tale deeply rooted in the East Asian tradition, and by rendering them into English, into another language, there are a lot of things lost. I can't explain, for example, the ancient tradition of homosexuality or queer desire, from the cut sleeve to Southern style, etc. I simply can't explain them. But for me, the most important thing is communication. I want to tell the story to a readership, to a, in a way, international readership. So even in China, not many people know the rabbit god story. So it is an important way, in a way, thing to tell the story first in my own way. And then, of course, I mean, because the classical text simply has a paragraph of 100 or 200 words, etc. So that is actually great because it gives us a lot of freedom to elaborate on, to imagine what has happened. So I guess that translation is not satisfactory, but I think the communication is more important, and especially in what currently our divided world and individualized kind of subjectivity. So more communication and more understanding and talking to each other is important. So I tried my best to bring out this character of the rabbi god. Whether it's faithful or not is a different question.
Well, it rendered beautifully from how I read it, from what I got from it. I don't know how close it is to where it's coming from and what it means for your ownership, but you did, as a person reading it in English, an absolutely beautiful job.
Thank
From the angle of reclamation and connection and, sort of building bridges to the past, from the past and to the future and into the now, what are some of the impacts personally that you found on claiming, owning, and retelling this ancient tale?
you. It's very powerful to retell the ancient tales. So for those who may not have read the book, so the first section of the book is basically rewriting of six actually ancient Chinese tales, from the rabbit god to the moon goddess to the story of butterfly lovers, etc. So those stories are widely known in China, probably more of household name, apart from the rabbit god. However, they were interpreted or they were told in different ways. For example, the moon goddess story. So when I remember when my parents or grandparents tell the story, they pretty much says as this is an evil woman who betrayed men. Therefore, she was banished to the moon. And now look at how poor she is, miserable she is. She's on the moon and were not able to whatever. So enjoy the kind of heavenly happiness or whatever. However, I think my take is different. So, but for the kind of moon goddess story, I did a feminist rewriting of the story. Basically, me started by writing about a story of domestic violence and betrayal, and then a revenge from the moon goddess. And the moon goddess also, I mean, declares that, so what's the use of the earth? I mean, what's good about the earth? It's polluted and men are arrogant. And they send spaceships to conquer or colonize the outer space. So essentially, in this story, actually, from a kind of more misogynistic story to a kind of feminist rage and to a story about environmental justice and, in a way, spatial justice. So by retelling the story in this way, I'm able to articulate my own concerns, basically, I mean, those feminist issues, queer issues, environmental justice, etc. So in a way that the old renditions or old tellings of the story couldn't do so. So, and in the process, I'm also empowered because I realized that those cultural resources or traditions are not burdens anymore. So in the past, I thought about how cliche those stories are. Those stories are horrible in terms of queer people and women and people of color and so on. However, don't take them at face value. Take your own liberty to rewrite the stories, own the story. So the rewriting the story becomes an empowering experience for me so that I have belief in my own retelling of the story and in the kind of justice that I see as important in articulating.
Amen. Thank you. It speaks to, the connections, the way it connects into what it was that is obsolete while the story is not, and the way it really bridges into now, and the way that you've done that in a way that holds your true self at its center is just so beautiful to read. I really appreciate how the concepts of different but same and concordance and discordance is explored in the book. And the tension of holding all these realities within us and finding our own way into cohesive existence within ourselves and with how we show up in the world and how we negotiate contact and relationships. And, there are quite a few poems in which you explore this. I want to invite you to read Morning Tea, please.
I'm happy to. So let me find that poem. It's on 52 of the page, which is the third section of the page. The third section of the book is basically about a kind of story about queer love and intimacy. So, which is a celebration of queer desire. So now I have found the page and let me share the page. So it's called Morning Tea. Every morning, I wake up to the whistle of a boiling kettle, like an old Victorian steam engine, the creak of wooden floorboards, a dark shadow hovering over my bed, the hot smell and strong taste of Yorkshire tea, filled with your love almost overflowing, gargled down my throat, almost gagging. This isn't a murder mystery. It's our morning tea ritual. The tea isn't the Longjing Da Hong Pao or Tie Guan Yin I was used to. And my mum would certainly frown if she ever saw you pour milk into the tea. But It still tastes like tea and makes me feel at home.
That poem just really felt like such a balm as I was going through the book, and it has such resonance with other poems in that section, like, Calling Home and With the World End. Right, World End is the name of the poem. Were these poems emotionally difficult to write? And do you have a favorite poem in the collection? Those are multiple questions, but yeah. And if yes, why?
Well, all those poems are, well, in a way, actually, I think that as poets, I mean, all the poems are like our little babies, and each one has its own journey and has its own, in a way, life. For example, the morning tea poem, I wrote actually basically in the morning. My husband often, I mean, brings tea to the bedroom actually every morning. He wakes up much earlier than I do. So essentially, I mean, well, it's usually that before I woke up and I would smell the tea or hear the creaking boards, floorboards, and it reminds me, once I was joking that this really sounds like a Midsummer Murders. So it's really those kind of minutiae of everyday life and queer intimacy that is really sweet, but sometimes there are difficult moments. For example, the poem that you alluded to, which is Calling Home, which is basically when I call home, I can't talk about my being gay. I even can't talk about actually my partner, even if I and my husband have been married for a few years, but simply actually my parents don't talk about it as if it's something actually to be shied away from. That was a very difficult poem to write, but I'm pleased that I wrote it. And some Chinese queer friends, after hearing or reading that poem, said that poem actually is very touching because they all share the similar experiences, knowing their sexuality but couldn't talk about it with their parents. I don't have a favorite poem, but I think that in the latter half of the book, especially in the fourth section, my poems have become more relevant to contemporary times, in particular to the issues in contemporary Britain. I think that I'm probably going to share the poem which is called Eurostar, so which is a train that connects Britain to continental Europe. I'll read the poem and then probably if you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss the poem. Eurostar. Like a bullet, the train cuts through white, chilly fog. Through the green fields, saturated with romanticized war memories. Beneath a stretch of water, La Manche. The sleeve used to extend greetings, wave farewells, wipe tears. On board, the aromas of coffee, cheese, and croissant, the sound of multilingual announcements and conversations. On board, one embodies the being of a cosmopolitan world citizen. If Europe is a cosmos, the train is a bright star. Its glamour hasn't dwindled after Brexit. Separating the rail and the land on both sides stand tall fences, fences made of iron and steel and razor wire, overseen by security guards and countless cameras. Fences reminding me of the Berlin Wall. Fences separating life from death, hope from despair, this world from that world. For some, a couple of hours feels like an eternity. The train plunges deep into the dock. Apparitions superimpose on mirror-like windows. Smiling faces, crying faces, faces of horror, faces of empathy, only illuminated by flickering lights that fly past. In my mind's eye, swarms of fish roam freely around us.
Thank you. I'm inclined to almost not want to ask any questions to just that you just read poems. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's just it's such a balm, and these poems are just so beautiful. Thank you so much for writing them. The book is sectioned into uh, old tales retold, notes on belonging, queer intimacy, and stories of outrage and hope, different sections. How did you get there? Did you have the poems and this was the best arrangement? Or did you have the arrangement and then write into the concept, the proverbial chicken and egg, which came first?
that's a great question. Yes, I think different people have different ways of working. For me, this collection was pretty much a collection of my work in the past 3 years. I wrote lots of poems, and of course, I mean, I tend to write poems on certain topics. For example, in certain periods of time, I write about queer love and intimacy and gay life, including gay bars and so on. In other times, I write about home and visiting China, missing parents, and the difficulty of, for example, adapting to the life in China and so on. So it's really about transcultural experience and intercultural communication. I suppose that when I was ready to put together the book, I put all the poems together and look at their common themes, and I eventually organized 4 piles of paper. I suppose that they automatically became 4 sections. But in a way, those 4 sections are relevant, are actually reasonable, because the book basically follows a chronological order from ancient times to present. And it also, I mean, crosses geographical boundaries from China to, for example, to my childhood, actually, and then to my migration experience to Australia, Germany, and so on and so forth. So it also has a geographical span. So in a way, actually, it has worked because each section can be read separately and with its own theme. For example, section 1 is pretty much about rewriting Chinese stories or tales, but the themes such as feminist rage, such as queer desire, such as trans issues are pretty much manifested in the next few sections. And the second section, which is about me, who I am, my identity, and my quest for the self, etc. And section 3 is a relatively coherent, I would say, queer love story from meeting up to breaking up, unfortunately. This is a spoiler. And then section 4 is about some contemporary issues, including migration, pandemic, racism, and lockdown, among others. So it has worked, I'm pleased, although the start of the book is quite random.
Do get your copy of the book, which I'm sure Tara will drop in the chat how you can buy it. Um, I love the moments of queer joy in this collection. You know, those first formative experiences, first crush, first love, comes the encounter, and then the later passion. The later poems are full of passion and desire. Dancing nude, lots of leather, secret small metal ring. Get the book. Uh, are there any poems you wanted in the book but decided in the end not to include, and why? And if that is true, would you be happy to read one for us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've had to, in a way, throw away some poems from the collection, as you can imagine, either because they don't fit into the theme or because technically they are not the best poems. But one poem that I, took out of the collection eventually entered my pamphlet, which is called Dream of the Orchid Pavilion. And that is also a persona poem, which is about Fu Manchu. So many of you may know that there's this Dr. Fu Manchu figure, which is supposedly representing the kind of Chinese characters who happen to be very negative representation. It was written by an English novelist at the beginning of the 20th century. The novelist's name is Sax Rohmer. So the poem is called A Letter. Let me share the screen. A letter by Dr. Fu Manchu to Dr. Rohmer, to Sax Rohmer. So I hope you can see the screen. PG, can you confirm if you can see the screen? A letter from Dr. Fu Manchu to Sax Rohmer.
I can, yes.
Okay, brilliant. So this is a poem that I didn't include in the book, and I'll explain why. A letter from Dr. Fu Manchu to Sax Rohmer. You were my creator, but I'm not grateful. Why would I thank someone who has portrayed me as a supervillain, my people as inscrutable, cunning, pernicious, having no flesh or feeling, unworthy of sympathy or respect? We are as ordinary and human as everyone else. We work hard day and night in laundries, takeaways, and supermarkets to feed our families, raise our children, pay bills and taxes. You accuse us of stealing English jobs and squandering British welfare. You see our food as unhygienic and us as morally corrupt. You condemn us for spreading viruses, causing a global pandemic. You send health inspectors, tax officers, policemen, and even gangsters to raid our businesses, our homes. You took our men away and removed our children from their beloved parents. We are poor migrants and refugees who have been struggling to survive. We're simply looking for a place to live, but you see us as swarms, pests, enemies, criminal gangs, second-class citizens, refusing to grant us visa and asylum, instead sending us overseas to detention centers. Can't you see our sufferings? Don't you also have a heart? Have you created me merely for your own pleasure and success? So this was a poem, and the poem did touch on some of the kind of themes in the book, such as migration, such as racism. However, the book already included actually a couple of poems about racism against Asians, actually in British history, and in particular Liverpool 1946, which was basically about how the post-Second World War British government actually sent Chinese seamen who have been living and serving the British Empire at that time for a long time. So I suppose that the kind of topic has already been touched on. And one other thing is that this is a very experimental point because it's basically actually what mixing historical facts with contemporary reality. So the Fu Manchu story pretty much was set at the beginning of the 20th century, but there are some references to contemporary times, such as sending refugees to overseas centers and so on and so forth. I thought that historically this might be very confusing, but it's meant to be a piece of experimental literature that reminds people of the kind of continuity of racism and anti-immigration in this country.
Thank you. It's so necessary to keep those stories lest we forget, because the moment we forget, we are doomed to repeat history. So and art is such a way to hold stories. So thank you very much for including those stories in the narrative, for holding those at the center, and again, to providing that bridge from the past to the present that helps to shape how we move into the future. What is your writing practice? Like, what time of day? What's the frequency? What works for you?
Mhm. I usually write in the mornings. So often I wake up, the first thing I would do is to sit in bed and do some free write, whatever comes to my mind. So yeah, the free write is very important for me. It's more like a diary, but sometimes actually I can always distill some kind of poetic elements or moments from my free write. And of course, I mean, I'm also a big fan of taking poetry workshops. For example, in Nottingham, I attend bi-weekly paper crane poetry, in which the poets simply gather, and then the instructor, Liam Morden, gave us some exercises, and we are usually able to write 1 or 2 poems. As I understand, this is also what we're going to do next. So I would highly recommend a poetry workshop as not only a community space, but also a space that encourage you to write poems, to inspire you actually to explore new thoughts. For example, I've written some surprising, for example, sci-fi poems through the workshops, which I normally wouldn't write. So I recommend morning page as well as poetry workshops.
Morning page and poetry workshops to all the poets in the room. And even if you're not a poet, morning pages, I think it's just free writing in the morning, more or less. I mean, there might be a method, but if you don't have a method, still lean into recording and documenting your one life. You're worth it. What's one book that you think everyone should read and why? Or maybe there are many books. Tell us about them.
Yeah, I went through my shelf before the meeting today, and I'm probably going to recommend 2 books. The first one is Letters to a Writer of Color. So it's an edited book published by Penguin last year. What's great about this book is that they interviewed, well, many, I think about 20 queer writers, not only queer writers of color, but writers of color about their writing experience. Of course, most of those writers in the book are novelists, but poets can still learn a lot. Basically, it talks about how people of color can, for example, well, engage with their heritage and engage with the mainstream publishing industry. So the mainstream publishing industry might have certain conventions, expectations, etc. How do you deal with that? And this has a lot of strategies and advice to offer. I recommend it. It's called Letters to a Writer of Color. And the second book that I'm recommending was also published last year, which was called The Process of Poetry. So often we only see the published version of poetry. So we can't help saying, wow, this is so great poem, but not understanding how the poems came about. What's great about this book is that it actually shows the kind of, let me show you one page. So on the left hand, it's an original version or first version, which was pretty much like a free write. And then the writer, the poet, basically edited that into poetic form using particular formats, conventions, and forms, and so on and so forth. And then this is also followed by explanations and interviews about why did you make that change and so on. I find this quite useful because this gives me a kind of an insight into how established poets, I mean, work, how basic, and it also gives me more confidence, which basically says that your first draft, your poem doesn't have to be perfect at the start. It will need to be worked, and you can work on it and find the best form. Of course, poetry revision can last forever, but there will be a time that you will be more comfortable. For example, condensing a longer poem into a slightly shorter poem using particular rhyme schemes and so on and so forth. So I think that this book actually is worth reading, at least for those who want to improve their poetic crafts.
Yeah, that's by Rosie McGlone, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you said, but it includes an interview, I think,
Yeah, it
with where
does.
the actual poets tell how they modify stuff. Yeah.
Yes, it does. For example, at the beginning, it says, can you tell us a little bit about the origin of the poem? And then this will evolve eventually into why did you make that choice? Why did you, well, choose that form? Why did you change that word and so on?
Amazing, amazing. Um, so yeah, um, I really appreciate those recommendations. And I would love for you to hold up your two books. So I'm now going to hit screenshot.
Yep, happy to do so. So, Letters to a Writer of Color and the Process of Poetry. From my side, of course, the books are upside down, or the letters are not quite right, but it's okay. Have it done?
No, they are the right way around. Now hold up your books that you've written, please.
Okay, okay. So that's Passion of the Rabbit God, which is my poetry collection. And then I also published a pamphlet called The Dream of the Orchid Pavilion. The Dream of the Orchid Pavilion is also a kind of rewriting of ancient Chinese myth of the orchid pavilion story, but it also has a lot of contemporary relevance, which is about queer desire and life between China and Nottingham.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been so amazing listening to your work, particularly read by you, because I have read the book, but just having you sit me in the context have really helped with, particularly where I was talking about how things don't always translate well. To have you tell me about it and to tell me what it means to you, and to sit with you with it held at the center of your own self and your own presence and the way you own that story as part of the nation to whom it belongs, but own it in your full queerness is just heartwarming.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you being here and being willing to share this work with us, and to have put this work in the world. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
for the
very
great
much.
questions and conversations. I really enjoy those questions. And those questions also made me reflect on my own poetic practice as well as inspiration. And I'm going to pay more attention to the issue of translation and untranslatability in my future work. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if you will read us something that ends this section of our afternoon, that would be amazing.
Okay, so I think I'll probably read another a poem that I have recently published, but haven't gone into this book. So it's called Portrait of Self as a Banana. So this was actually to go back to our question about our discussions about the importance of writing workshops. So one day I attended a workshop and the writing prompt was, if you can imagine yourself to be a fruit, what fruit will this be? So this is my imagination. So I thought I would write a story about banana. So I'm going to read this poem. I'll share screen, but the link is also available in the chat. Before I read it, I'll just explain that banana is usually a slang that is used to describe any East Asian living abroad or born in the West, presumably. You have yellow skin and whatever. Okay, so self-portrait as a banana. Think of myself as a banana. Yellow skin, white flesh. Glaze of tropical sun, fragrance of autumnal breeze. Not as yellow as in yellow fever or yellow peril, but as yellow as a sunflower admiring the golden light, a cap zigzagging along grey city streets, a summer rain hibernating in the deep blue sea. Not as white as in whitewash or white privilege, but as white as a lotus flower serenading the moon, a polar bear melting the Arctic skyline, a vast stretch of snow sharpening the crisp winter air. If I must choose to be one, let me be as bent as a banana, bastard, queer, as adaptable as a banana, setting foot in new soils, making home where I grow. Thanks very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much, and thank you for the passion of the rabbit god. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.